So great to see you guys. It's great to have everyone joining us online as well. Man, I'm super pumped because, as many of you know, for the last couple of weeks I was out because our family was dealing with COVID. More specifically, my wife and I were dealing with COVID. And man, I just want to say thank you to a couple of people. First, thank you to Greg Tellison, who did a phenomenal job the last 2 weeks stepping in. It's never easy to get a phone call on Wednesday and say, can you be ready by Sunday? And so thank you so much, Greg. You did a phenomenal job. Also want to thank everybody who brought meals over to our family. And so, and also for everyone who loved on our kids. The best way to make somebody feel loved is to love on their kids. And so we appreciate that. And also want to thank everybody who is praying for us. We definitely felt your prayers. We were encouraged. And man, we're so thankful to be a part of a church that's like family. And so thank you guys so much for just loving on us and caring for us. And man, I'm excited because 2 weeks from today, there's this little Sunday. It's really not that big of a deal, but it's going to be Easter Sunday in 14 days. It's going to be absolutely amazing. We've got a few surprises in store. One of those is that we're going to have King of Pops here for all of our services that Sunday. And if you're not familiar with King of Pops, it's a gourmet popsicle place. And so free popsicles for everybody. And I know what you're thinking. You're thinking popsicles are for kids, but I will tell you, I'll throw some bows on a 5-year-old to get a King of Pops popsicle. They are phenomenal. And so they're going to be at all 3 of our services. That's right. We're going to have 3 Easter services. We're going to have both of our normal Sunday service times at 9:15 and 10:45. We're also going to have a Friday service at 7 p.m. And I know Friday is Good Friday, but it's actually a Easter service. And the reason we're doing that is really twofold. First, we know that spring break starts that weekend of Easter, and some of you are traveling, so we wanted to provide an option for you to worship and celebrate the resurrection with your church family before you leave town. But the second is that in order to make sure that we maintain all of our COVID protocols, we want to offer enough services to spread attendance out. And so that's why we're asking each and every family to register to attend the service that you would like to attend. There's seating capacity at each of those services. So you can do so by going to bpc.life. There's a little banner right at the top of our homepage, or you can open up the Church Center app, and there's a little thing in the bottom right-hand corner. It says events, and you can go ahead and reserve your seats. I will tell you that Friday 7 p.m. service is filling up quickly, and the 10:45 service on Sunday morning is right behind it. And so if you're serving in one service and you want to attend another, go ahead and reserve those seats because they're going to go out pretty quick. And so you have a couple more weeks to do that. Don't wait. Go ahead and reserve your seats today. But as excited as I am about Easter, I'm excited this morning to be continuing in our series called This, Not That. So you spent the better part of 2 months now going through one chapter in the Bible. We've been going verse by verse through Matthew chapter 5 as Jesus explains what the Christian life is all about. And kind of the whole idea behind this series is that a lot of us grew up thinking the Christian life was a certain way, but when we actually look at what Jesus teaches, we realize it's about something completely different. Here's what I mean. For a lot of people, we grew up thinking that the Christian life was that Jesus died on the cross for our sins, and if we believe in him, then one day we'll go to heaven, and between now and then we're supposed to do good deeds and help old ladies cross the road, and if you do the right things, then God blesses you, and if you do the wrong things, you don't get blessed, but one day this whole earth is going to be burned up anyway, and you'll be in heaven with Jesus, so who cares, right? That's what a lot of people's understanding of the Christian life is. The problem is, that's not what the Bible teaches. See, the Bible tells us that this world is a broken place. Now, you don't have to be a scholar or theologian to know that this world is messed up. Like, there are people who are otherwise healthy who all of a sudden get diagnosed with cancer. There's people who, minding their own business, driving down the street, and somebody swerves into their lane, and instantly they're paralyzed. There are people who struggle with depression and anxiety and feel that the only way out is to end their life. There are storms, tornadoes, hurricanes, tsunamis that wreak havoc, devastation, destruction, and death. And we look at the world and we think, God, is this the best that you could do? So we look around and we know that the world is broken. It's not the way that God would want it. But see, God has always had a plan to fix the world. See, there's these forces, sin and death, that are at work in our world, and God is defeating sin and death. In fact, in the Old Testament, he sets aside a people for himself, the nation of Israel. He calls them his kingdom. And he tells them that as part of my kingdom, you're supposed to turn this world back to the way I intended for it to be. You live the way that I want you to live, and we fix this broken world. But the nation of Israel was full of broken, sinful people, just like you and me. And as a result, they rejected God. They pushed him away. And after some time, God said, listen, I'm not going to force myself on you. I'm not going to force you to be in a relationship with me. So God removes himself from his people. And when the time was right, he sent his own son to do what Israel never could. Jesus lived the life that God wanted his people to live. And in doing so, he was setting everything back the way he intended. Like, have you ever noticed that everywhere Jesus goes, he's healing people who are sick? He's casting out demons and setting people free. He's taking dead people and raising them back to life. He's reversing the effects of sin and death. And ultimately, he dies on the cross. He's resurrected again, which means that his kingdom will never stop. And when we believe in him, we're actually born again into his kingdom. And that means that our job in the world, if we follow Jesus, is to fix this broken world, to go out and finish what Jesus started. Now, what that means is that everything we do matters. Right? Like, God's commands are not arbitrary. See, when God tells us not to lust, it's not because he's sexually repressed and he has nothing better to do than to scour your internet browser search history to see if there's anything there that he could send you to hell for. Right? It's not some arbitrary rule. See, when God tells us not to lust, he knows that when we lust, we dehumanize other people. We make them objects for our satisfaction, and in doing so, we dehumanize ourselves. In fact, pornography has become the biggest driver of human sex trafficking in our day. Not only that, but the most popular website for free pornography has gotten in trouble multiple times because they'll post videos on their homepage of women who are being abused because they were trafficked, of minors who've been trafficked, and those videos of them being violated are posted online. And so you think, well, it's just a little porn. It's not that big of a deal. But what you're actually doing is contributing to the sin and death that's at work in the world. And so when God tells us not to lust, it's not an arbitrary rule. He's calling us to value people, to see them as other people made in the image of God, and not to long for somebody who doesn't belong to us. Does that make sense? Now, it's easier for us, though, to take our faith and turn it into a list of rules, of do's and don'ts. And if I can just do these things, God will bless me. And if I don't do these things, then he won't. But we can kind of handle that. We like the to-do list. Now, we're not the only people in the Old Testament. That's kind of what the nation of Israel fell into as well. They thought if I can just follow all these commands, then God will be happy with me. But in Matthew chapter 5, Jesus is saying, listen, you've heard it said that this is the way you're supposed to live, but I'm telling you this is really the heart behind it. See, it's this, not that. See how I worked the name of the series title into the message? See, Jesus said, you've heard it said that you shouldn't murder, but I'm telling you, you shouldn't even harbor any bitterness or anger in your heart. Because murder always starts in the heart. You've heard it said that you shouldn't commit adultery, and you think as long as you didn't commit the physical act of adultery, you're good, but I'm telling you, don't even lust. You've heard it said that you can divorce for any reason as long as you give them a certificate, but I'm telling you that what God has joined together, nobody should separate. You've heard it said that it's okay to spin your words and twist the facts and come up with your alternate facts. But what I'm telling you is let your yes be yes and your no be no. Tell the truth in each and every circumstance. So you've heard it said that, but this is how you ought to live. Now, you have to know all that because what we're about to read today is going to be challenging. In fact, I think most of us could probably agree, okay, yeah, lust, probably not great. Divorce, nobody's ideal. Yeah, we don't want to harbor bitterness and anger. And yes, we should tell the truth. We could all agree on this. But what we're going to read today, I promise you, the first thing, your first instinct is going to be say, well, Jesus didn't really mean that. Jesus, this isn't the way the world actually works. Your first instinct is going to be to push against it because it's so countercultural to the way that our world operates. So I want to challenge us with two things right before we jump into Jesus' teaching this week. The first one is this. As we read this passage, I want to challenge us to read it without working in excuses for why Jesus doesn't actually expect us to live this way. Like, does Jesus actually expect us not to lust? Yes. Does Jesus actually expect us not to harbor bitterness and anger? Yes. So does Jesus actually expect us to do what he's called us to do today? Yes, absolutely. So let's just press pause on any excuses or any kind of pushback we have, and let's let Jesus make us uncomfortable. That's the first thing. The second thing, you are going to have questions, right? You're going to say, well, what about this? And what about this situation? And so what we do is we're going to have a phone number on the screen during the duration of the message, and you can text in your questions at any point today. And I set aside time at the end of each message every Sunday to answer your questions, because it's a lot more fun when we get to dialogue instead of just monologue. And so as I say something that maybe frustrates you or you want me to dive a little deeper, you have a what about, feel free to text it in and we'll talk about it at the end of the message. Now, having said all that, I want us to jump in this morning, Matthew chapter 5, starting in verse 38. And Jesus says this, "You have heard that it was said, an eye for an eye and a tooth for a tooth. But I tell you, don't resist an evildoer. On the contrary, if anyone slaps you on your right cheek, turn the other to him also. As for the one who wants to sue you and take away your shirt, let him have your coat as well. And if anyone forces you to go 1 mile, go with him 2. Give to the one who asks you, and don't turn away from the one who wants to borrow from you." It's kind of quiet in here. Everybody doing good? See, this is so crucial here, because Jesus says, you've heard it said, eye for an eye and tooth for tooth. Now remember, Jesus is not the 21st century pastor with his Champion sweatpants and his Air Jordans on talking to a 21st century church. He's a first century Jewish rabbi speaking to first century Jewish people. Where would first century Jewish people have heard an eye for an eye and tooth for tooth? Any guesses? Right, it's their scriptures. They heard that from scriptures. That's what God commanded. Jesus said, this is what you have heard. Now, there's a couple observations I want to make about that command from the Old Testament. The first one is this. This is actually a pretty revolutionary command at the time it was first recorded in the ancient Near East. Now, if you remember from school, the eye for eye, tooth for tooth, that's not like unique to the Bible, right? That's in the Code of Hammurabi, that's in a lot of other ancient religions, but it was actually very revolutionary. Because here's the deal. Nobody actually wants an eye for an eye and a tooth for a tooth. Because when somebody hurts you, you want to one-up them, right? You want an arm for your eye. You want a head for your tooth. And if you don't believe me, then just be around siblings for any length of time, right? I have 3 boys at our house, and every fight starts like this. Oh, well, he was looking at me funny, so I said something ugly to him. And then he punched me. So, of course, I kicked him. And then he body slammed me. And then we started throwing furniture. And the next thing you know, you run up there, there's blood everywhere. There's a tooth on the ground. Have no idea where that came from. It's because everybody always wants to one-up somebody else. You never want an eye for an eye. So in a sense, this is revolutionary because it's actually restrictive. It's saying, no, only an eye for an eye and a tooth for a tooth. In fact, the Old Testament goes even further, and it kind of explains, it says, well, if someone cuts off your hand, you can cut off their hand, or they can pay you a certain amount of money. Now, I don't know how they determine how much a hand is worth, but it kind of gives a whole new meaning to the phrase, it costs an arm and a leg, right? Like there's this idea that if wrong is done to you, there's this justice that you must enact. There must be an eye for an eye, tooth for a tooth. So it was restrictive. But the second thing is it's actually prescriptive. This was not optional for God's people. Deuteronomy chapter 19, verse 21, it says, do not show pity, okay? Don't show pity. Don't show mercy. Life for life, eye for eye, tooth for tooth, hand for hand, and foot for foot. You must do this. If you're tempted to be merciful, if you're tempted to show grace, don't do it. Don't show pity, life for life, eye for eye, tooth for tooth. This was something that was prescriptive. You had to do it. Now, what is Jesus saying? You have heard it said in your scriptures that you must take an eye for an eye and a tooth for a tooth. But I'm telling you Don't resist an evildoer. Now, the New Testament was originally written in Greek, and so in some of your translations, there might be a little asterisk or a footnote there. That word resist actually means to resist with the same force. In other words, it means to retaliate. So Jesus said, the scriptures tell you, you must take an eye for an eye and a tooth for a tooth, but I'm telling you, don't retaliate against an evil person. See, this is one of the clearest examples in Scripture we have where what Jesus teaches us, don't miss this, for your moral authority, moral guidance on your life, you do not look to the Old Testament because that's not where Jesus looked either. Now, I know what you're thinking. So are you saying we should just rip the Old Testament out of the Bible? Absolutely not. Because you cannot understand what Jesus came to do if you do not understand the Old Testament. But what Jesus actually tells us in Hebrews chapter 8, verse 13, is that in accomplishing his mission, he made the Old Testament obsolete. It's over. It's done with. So when you're trying to figure out what to do, don't open up to some random verse in Leviticus and try to pull that into today's context. You look to Jesus. Hebrews 1:3 says Jesus is the exact representation of who God is. So do you want to know who God is? Don't look in Joshua. Don't look in Genesis. Look to Jesus. As Christians, our faith is based on Jesus. And here, Jesus is saying, the Old Testament says this, but I'm telling you, do the exact opposite. Do not retaliate. Do not fight violence with violence, anger with anger. Do not retaliate against an evildoer. Now, Jesus gives us 4 contexts how this plays out. Now, the first one is probably the most famous one. He says, if someone slaps you on the right cheek, turn the other cheek also. Now, there's some kind of cultural background I want to give here, and so in order for us to really understand this, I'm going to need a volunteer. But I've been doing this long enough to know nobody volunteers for the slapping, so I'd like you to welcome to the stage our student director, Keith Cezak. This is what happens when you're late to staff meeting. You get slapped on stage in front of everybody. No, I promised him I would not slap him. I promised it, so I'm not going to slap him. But Keith is going to help us demonstrate this important point, that when Jesus is talking, remember, first century Jewish culture, very much wrapped up in shame and honor. So you could do things that would bring shame on yourself, and it would lower your station in life. It would impact your ability to work in the marketplace. It could impact who your kids could marry. And likewise, you could do things that would bring honor to yourself and kind of elevate your station. And we kind of look at that and say, well, that's kind of like primitive, and I can't believe people would live that way, but don't we kind of do the same thing on social media? Right, like you have these pictures of your perfect kids and your marriage that's all together and you love your job. See, nobody posts the video of them screaming at their kids when they do something wrong. Nobody posts a video of them in a fight with their spouse or post their thoughts when they say, I hate my job, I wish I never worked at this place. Like we have this image that we want people to have of us, even in the house that we buy, the car that we drive, the school our kids go to. It's all about projecting this image so we can kind of elevate ourselves. It was the same thing in that culture, only to the nth degree, because it actually would have ramifications for your social interactions. So, if you were going to slap somebody, which hand are you going to use? You have 2 choices, right? Left hand, right hand. But in that culture, the left hand was considered the hygienic hand. So when you go to the restroom, you need to wipe, you always use your left hand. So you wouldn't use that left hand to slap somebody because that would be gross. Like, you're disgusting. Why would you do that? That would bring shame on yourself. So instead, you would use your right hand. Now, Jesus said if someone slaps you on your right cheek, turn to them the other cheek also. Now, Keith, would you point to your right cheek? That's right. He's student director, so we're never 100% sure. All right, so if I'm going to use my right hand to hit Keith's right cheek, how am I going to do that? It's got to be the backhand, right? Now, in that culture, the backhand was how a master would treat a slave. This was very demoralizing. It was very demeaning. It would bring shame on the person who is backhanded. So Jesus said, if someone slaps you on your right cheek, notice I did not actually hit him. It's on video. He says, now turn to them the other cheek also. So now if I'm going to hit him again, how am I going to hit him? With the palm of my hand. Now, the palm of your hand is how you would hit someone who is an equal. So what Jesus is saying here is when someone attacks you, when they demean you, when they position themselves as the master and you as the slave, your instinct is going to be to retaliate, to hit back, to fight violence with violence. But what I'm telling you is no, turn the other cheek. Don't retaliate, but respond in a way that, yes, you might get hit again, but if you do, you're forcing them to admit, I was wrong, we're actually equals. Does this make sense? All right, everybody give it up for Keith. So we're not to retaliate, but we're to respond in this creative way that does what? It exposes the ugliness of the perpetrator's heart. All of a sudden, they have to come to grips with the fact that I'm demeaning this person. I'm positioning myself above them, but I'm no better than them. So when you reveal the ugliness of their heart, the goal is repentance and reconciliation. Second context, Jesus said, if someone sues you for the shirt off your back, give them your coat also. Now, there was this thing in first century Jewish culture. Everyone had this kind of coat, but no one was allowed to take it from you. Like you could lose everything. You could lose your house, all your money. You could lose everything. No one was allowed to take your coat because this was a provision that if you were homeless, you still had something to keep you warm. It was a blanket, but also to cover your nakedness. Because to be naked would be to bring shame on yourself. But if someone else took your coat and made you naked, it would actually bring shame on them. We actually see this in the Old Testament. You guys know the story of Noah's Ark, right? Do you know the story right after that? Is that Noah gets drunk and passes out naked in his tent. And then his sons go in to see him naked, and one son brings his other brothers in to see his dad naked. Do you know who brought shame on the family? It wasn't Moses for being drunk. It was the son for exposing his nakedness. So in the same way, Jesus is saying, imagine you're in a courtroom, and somebody is literally suing you for the shirt off your back. They want to take everything from you. Not only should you give them your shirt, but give them your coat as well. Now, if your shirt's gone and your coat's gone, what are you? You're naked. You're naked in the courtroom, and what you're doing is you're saying, listen, this is what your greed has done. This is the ugliness of your heart. Your greed, you think it's bringing shame on me, but it's actually bringing shame on you. You want everything, and it's destroying you. See, we live in a culture that says if someone sues you, what do? File a countersuit. We're going to go back at them. Jesus says, no. Don't react that way. Give them what they want and even more to expose the greed in their heart. Again, someone's trying to position themselves above you, and you force them to say, no, we're equal. Does this make sense? All right, third context. Jesus says, if someone forces you to go 1 mile, go with them 2. Go the second mile. This is where we get that phrase, right? We're going to go the extra mile. The first century Jewish people, if you remember from history, were being ruled over by the Romans. And so every day they would see Roman soldiers marching up and down the streets. It was a reminder that their ancestors had been conquered, they had failed, and they were now being ruled by someone they didn't want to rule them. In fact, there was a group of Jewish people, a sect among the Jewish people known as the Zealots. And the Zealots believed that one day God was going to send a Savior and a Messiah who was going to reestablish Israel as the kingdom of God, and they were going to do that by overthrowing the Romans. So the Zealots would go around and they were building this kind of secret army to help the Messiah when he was ready. And so you can imagine when Jesus starts saying things like, I've come to bring the kingdom of God, all of a sudden the Zealots are getting excited. This is the guy. We're going to overthrow the Romans. In fact, some of the Zealots were so passionate they became known as dagger men. Doesn't that sound like something out of like a 1950s spy movie, like the Daggermen? And what they would do is they would keep a dagger in their robes, and they would try to get close enough to the Roman soldiers that they could pull out their dagger, slip it in between the plates of armor, in between their ribs, and either puncture their lungs or their heart and kill these Roman soldiers. That's how much they hated the Romans. See, the Romans walking the street reminded the Jewish people that they were conquered. But if they could kill some soldiers, that would remind the Romans not to get too comfortable because we've got a plan of our own. Now, probably the closest equivalent I could come up with is, let's imagine, it's like every post-World War II apocalyptic movie, let's imagine we lost World War II and the Nazis were in charge in America. And every time you walked out in the street, you saw troops marching up and down, tanks going all over. And let's say that they would be able to force you to take them around in your car for up to an hour at a time, because that's exactly what Roman soldiers were allowed to do. They had so much gear that they were allowed to go to any conquered people and say, you have to carry my stuff for 1 mile. No more, but up to a mile, they could stop you from doing whatever it is you were doing. So imagine, you're living in this land, Nazis are in charge. You think, man, my ancestors, this isn't how it was supposed to be. If I was there, things would have been different. We should be free. Now, you're driving, you're dropping little Johnny off at basketball practice, and then you're driving over to the grocery store to pick up stuff for dinner, and you're going to make it back in time to pick him up from practice. But on the way, you stop at a red light. A Nazi soldier knocks on your window and says, you know the rule. You have to drive me around for the next hour. You're my Uber driver. So all of a sudden, you're trying to call people to get someone to pick up Johnny and figure out what's for dinner, and your whole day has been thrown off because you have to escort this Nazi around that you can't stand. Now, that's kind of the feelings that the Jewish people had about the Roman soldiers. And what Jesus said is, when these Roman soldiers forced you to go 1 mile, you know what you should do? Don't stab them. Don't fight them. Go an extra mile. Yeah, it's going to cost you time. It's going to inconvenience you, but go the extra mile. Why? Because the first mile, they're the master and you're the slave. But the second mile, you're not being forced to go with them. You're going to serve them. Now you're on a level playing field. And think about all the fun conversations in that second mile. Can you imagine the Roman soldier saying, all right, you can drop my stuff. You say, no, come on, let's go another mile. This guy's going to think you're crazy. Then all of a sudden you start talking about Jesus and about what he's done in your life. And all of a sudden you have an opportunity to love and to serve somebody who just a moment ago had positioned themselves above you. You responded in a way that put you on level playing field. Does this make any sense? Last context. He says, if someone wants to borrow money from you, give it to them. That one makes me uncomfortable. I don't like that one. I wish Jesus had just kind of stopped after the other verses. I always am like, but Jesus, don't you understand? I could lose out on this money. This doesn't make any sense. This is not practical. But I think there's a lot of wisdom in what Jesus is saying here, because we know that Scripture tells us the borrower is slave to the lender. And if you don't think that's true, try not paying your mortgage payment for a few months and see how free you actually are. And when you loan somebody money, all of a sudden you're not a friend, you're not a parent, you're not a sibling, you're the bank, and they're the customer. It changes the whole dynamic of the relationship. And I cannot tell you how many families I've seen torn apart because somebody lent some money, and then they had to chase them down to get it back and charge them interest and everything else. And what Jesus is saying is losing the money you'd rather lose the money than lose the relationship. It's okay for you to lose that money. Don't lose the relationship. That's a hard word. Because in this situation, when you lend out money, you get put on top. And Jesus says, no. Give it, and if they don't ever give it back, that's okay. Because the relationship is more important than the money. Now that leads to a whole load of questions. It doesn't seem practical. Like, how does this work in the world? And I think this is where we have to understand that the goal is not to do good deeds so that God blesses us. Because if that's the case, when you do this stuff, you know what you do? You open yourself up to being taken advantage of. If you turn the other cheek, you know what can happen? You can get slapped again. If you borrow money or if you lend money out, you know what could happen? You could never get it back. If you give someone your coat, you could have nothing. If you go the extra mile, they could ridicule you, mock you. It could be a waste of your time. See, the goal is not that we do these things because it somehow unlocks all of these. It's not a life hack, okay? The Bible is not life hacks or 10 steps to living your best life now. That's not what it is. Jesus is saying this is how the kingdom works. And your goal is not to change other people. Your goal is to respond in such a way that the Holy Spirit can move and begin to convict those people about their behavior. Your job is not to enact justice. Scripture tells us it's God's kindness that leads us to repentance. It's not his anger. It's not his wrath. It's not his judgment. It's his kindness. And yet, how often do we feel like we need to deliver justice? Because that's the only way people are really going to learn. And Jesus says, no. It's not about defending your rights. It's about picking up your cross. After Easter, we're doing a series called Things Jesus Never Said. And one of the weeks is stand up for your rights. Jesus didn't say that. He said the opposite. He said, pick up your cross, lay down your life, be willing to die for other people. By the way, I'll get on my soapbox for a minute. That's why I will not understand people who follow Jesus but refuse to wear a mask when the store asks you to, because it makes you uncomfortable. Jesus asked you to die for other people, and we're not willing to be uncomfortable and wear a piece of cloth over our mouth for a few minutes while we're in the store. Jesus has called us to this radical way of living. Now, how does that happen? It starts with how we think. Because as long as we think like the world, that we need justice and we need revenge and we need to retaliate, that's always going to be our default. So we have to change our thinking if we want to change our living. So I want to give you 3 practical kind of mindset shifts that we need to make if we're going to apply this in our lives. The first one is this. We need to move from a mindset of conflict to compassion. I want to move from conflict to compassion. Here's what I mean. Some of you you live a life of conflict. Like all you want to do is argue with people. And I know this because I'm your friend on Facebook. Honestly, I thought I liked some of you till I was your friend on Facebook, you know? But there's some people, they're just going to argue about everything, right? Like you could post, man, what a beautiful day out. And this person's going to comment and say, it's not going to be a beautiful day if the liberal elite get control of our government. And you're like, stop. But not everything is a political debate. Not everything's an argument. Like, listen, you can post a meme to own the libs, but what relationship did you sacrifice? Like some of us just have such a spirit of conflict. I'm going to go ahead and step into it here. You would rather win a political battle and lose the spiritual battle. Can I just tell you something, church? If you think that following Jesus means convincing everyone to be a Republican, then you're serving the wrong master. Jesus says you cannot serve 2 masters. You will love the one and hate the other. And some of you love your country more than you love your Savior. And here's the sad thing. Some of you don't know the difference. See, we are called to move from this conflict. You are not too convinced. You're never going to argue somebody into the kingdom. You're never going to convince somebody that you're right because you posted the best argument in the world as your Facebook status. That's not what's going to happen. Lives are changed not from conflict, but compassion. I've shared this story before, and listen, I've been pastor for 6 years. I only have so many stories, so you're just going to have to sit and listen to some of the same ones over and over again. But when I was in high school, I got to go to Governor's Honors Program, which is nerd camp in the summer. You know, most people look forward to the summer because you can go on vacation, and I went to college for 6 weeks at Valdosta State in the summer and had a blast. But I remember we're sitting we have the old style dorm rooms, like the prison dorm rooms, you know, where it's just like 2 people in a cell. I mean, a room together and community showers, like not like the nice ones now where everybody has their own room and bathroom. And I remember I was hanging out with a kid down the hall. And we started to have this friendship, this relationship, and I'll never forget. He told me that he'd recently come out as gay to his parents. And they were traditional conservative Christians, and it didn't go over well. And the more that he was talking and sharing with me, he didn't say it in these words, but I kind of got that the culture in their household was every morning the parents woke up and put on their metaphorical armor because they were ready to go to war. And see, they thought they were fighting for their kid, but really they were just fighting with their kid. And then at the same time, the son woke up every morning, put on his metaphorical armor, and he thought he was fighting for himself, but really he was just fighting his parents. There's just this spirit of conflict. And I remember over those weeks, we got to become friends, and I got to listen to his story, and we had spiritual conversation. We had great time together, but I'll never forget. He said, man, I wish there were just more Christians who would listen. I wish there were more Christians who would just be compassionate. And just think about that. Like we can be known for what we're against, or we can be known for what we're for. You always want to be fighting with people. It wasn't me trying to convince them to think and do the things you want them to do, or could we have compassion and listen? Because it's through compassion that hearts change, that the Spirit can begin to move. We have to move from conflict to compassion. The second thing, we need to move from malice to mercy. I know it's kind of weird, but I'm trying to do the pastor thing where everything starts with the same letter, right? Malice and mercy. Really what I mean is we got to move from this idea of we want justice to we've got to give mercy. See, the Old Testament says, do not show mercy. Don't show pity. Get justice. Jesus says, no. Show mercy. And here's the thing. Mercy requires risk. Again, you might get slapped again. You might not get your money back. It requires risk. But here's the beautiful thing. Do you know what mercy does? It turns someone who's an enemy into your family. It turns someone who is a foe into a friend. Someone who is a nemesis into a neighbor. I just gave you some great alliteration there. That better show up on somebody's Twitter today. I don't know, that was good. But man, when you show mercy, it changes the disposition of your relationships. Again, our job is not to get justice. Our job is to love other people well. All right, I'm out of time, but I'm still going to throw it open to Q&A. This is second service. We can go as long as we want, right? We got a question? Does turning the other cheek mean self-defense is wrong in a situation of violence? Oh, this is such a good question. Turning the other cheek, all right? I'm going to use a word, I'm going to throw it out there, and I'm going to let you get shocked, and then we'll settle in, okay? Pacifism. For the first 300 years of the Christian faith, Christians were marked differently from other faiths because they were committed to pacifism. Now, here's the problem. Most of us aren't good spellers. And so when you spell pacifism, you think it's P-A-S-S, like you're passive in doing something. But actually, pacifism is spelled P-A-C-I. It's pacify. Now, how many people have ever been around a crying baby before? Now, do you just sit and let that crying baby cry? No, you're going for the pacifier, the binky, you're throwing an iPad, you're giving them whatever they want. You're actively working to pacify the situation. In the same way, to follow Jesus in nonviolence doesn't mean you don't do anything. It doesn't mean that there can't be self-defense. It doesn't mean that you can't restrain somebody, but it does mean that we're not going to retaliate violence with violence. Because you guys know the saying, right? An eye for an eye makes the whole world blind. See, we're called to live a different way. We're called to be a different kind of people. And this is a hard teaching. This is something that challenges us. We should be wrestling with. The last thing I would say, last mindset shift we need to make is we got to move from retaliation to reconciliation. See, sometimes when somebody hurts us, we want to hurt them back. This ever happened in your marriage, or is it just me? I'll just be honest with you, be very transparent. The ugliest things I've ever said in my life, I've said to my wife. Because we get hurt. And so we want to hurt somebody back just a little bit. And one day you wake up and you wonder, man, how did this relationship fall apart? I got this wonderful picture yesterday. Our student director, Keith, it was his son Tavner's first birthday. They had a piñata. You know it's a good party when there's a piñata there, right? You've never been to a bad party with a piñata. Think about it. You know I'm right. But I'm watching these kids, and they're getting the bat, and they're going. There's the first couple people are swinging, and then the next few people go, and then finally somebody hits it, and the whole thing bursts open, right? And I thought it was funny because the last two kids to swing were my middle son and my youngest son. And my middle son goes up there and he swings 3 times, and he's got it all. It's right there. It's about to break. But his 3 swings are over, so he hands it to my youngest son. He goes up, first swing, boom, candy's flying everywhere. The whole thing busted apart. And you know what my middle son did? The first thing he did is he went and grabbed candy. Okay, let's be clear. Second thing he did, he said, Dad, I loosened it up for him. I did all the hard work. And you might look at somebody else and say they're the reason the relationship ended, but maybe you loosened it up for them. Maybe the way that you retaliated, you took a few swings in there. You said a few things that you shouldn't have said. You did a few things that you wish you could take back. And you look and the relationship's broken and you're blaming somebody else, but you were holding the bat. Man, the relationship has to be more important than revenge. I'll end with this. This past Father's Day might be my favorite Father's Day. Because I'll be honest, I love being here. I love teaching. You guys know this is what happens when I don't teach for a few weeks. I go a little bit over, but that's okay. But over the summer, we were doing our online only services. So on Father's Day, I got to sleep in. I got to watch service in my PJs with my coffee. Shout out to everyone watching online right now. And then I got to take a nap that afternoon and woke up from my nap, and my wife said, I'm going to make you homemade fried shrimp, baked potatoes, green beans, going to make you homemade dessert. And I'm thinking, amen. Yes, Lord, this is awesome. She said, I just need you to go to the grocery store and pick up the stuff. And for some of you, you think, I hate the grocery store. I love the grocery store because I put my headphones in, I put my mask on, I listen to a podcast, and it's an introvert's dream. Nobody's going to talk to you. Nobody's going to bother you. You just get peace and quiet to yourself. And so I'm living my best life. I get in the car, I'm pumped up, I'm ready to go. And I pull in the parking lot at the grocery store, and I'm sitting there, and I'm getting my mask ready and put my headphones in and get my podcast pulled up. And I notice this car pulls in right next to me. And so I did what every normal person would do, is I look over. And this dude is shooting me this death stare. So I do what any normal person would do, and I pretend to do something on my phone. But what is this guy's problem? And as I'm sitting there looking at my phone, all of a sudden he gets out of the car and he bangs on the window. And again, I'm not thinking, so I'm like an idiot. I roll down the window. And he said, you cut me off back there, and do you know you almost wrecked my car? And I mean, this guy lays into me. Now, I don't know about you, but I'm listening to this, I'm thinking, this dude's crazy. Like, he followed me into the parking lot just to yell at me. And so I'm thinking, okay, what am I going to do? And in that moment, I felt like the Holy Spirit told me, apologize. And so this guy is yelling and ranting and raving, and finally he comes to a stopping point. And he looks at me, and I said, dude, I'm so sorry. You're right. You know, I was just in the zone, and I wasn't paying attention. I need to be more careful. I'm so sorry. And that dude, like, took a step back, like he'd just been slapped in the face. And you know what he did? He said, man, I'm so sorry. I'm just having a bad day. It's Father's Day. My family didn't do anything for me. It just set me off there. We had a great conversation, got an opportunity to pray for him. Listen, not every situation ends that way. You might apologize and they might still yell at you. And that might not have changed his life, but you know what it did in that moment? That changed my life. Because I realized that, you know what? Took a situation that could have gone sideways. And by choosing the third way, not to retaliate, not to match his energy, but to choose the way of Jesus, led for an opportunity for the Holy Spirit to work and to move. And I promise you, you're going to have an opportunity this week for the same thing. Could be somebody at work, could be in your marriage, could be pulling in the parking lot at the grocery store. But I promise you, you'll have an opportunity. The question is, which way will you choose? The way of the world or the way of the kingdom? So here's what I want to do. I want to end our time together a little differently today, because this is a lot of stuff to wrestle with, to kind of work through. And so what I want to do is just take a moment for you to begin processing, what does this look like in my life? So all across this room, would you just bow your heads and close your eyes? And here's what I want to challenge you to do. This is a dangerous prayer, but I'm going to challenge you to pray it. I want you to ask the Holy Spirit to put his finger on areas in your life where you've been operating out of conflict instead of compassion. Areas where you've tried to get justice instead of show mercy. And areas where you've retaliated instead of trying to repair a relationship. And as the Holy Spirit is revealing that to you, I just want to pray for you, that you would have the strength to live the way of Jesus. God, we just thank you so much. That even when we were your enemies, you died for us. That you took the risk to show mercy to us. I pray right now for every person in here who has someone they haven't talked to in years because of bitterness. I pray that today they would let that go and there'd be reconciliation. I pray for every conflict that we're going to encounter this coming week, that you would help us to see the third way. God, I pray that we would be a people so different from the world that they take notice. They say there is something different. Not so that we get the attention, Jesus, but so that you do. So that your kingdom can grow and expand here in Woodstock as it is in heaven. It's in your name I pray. Amen.